Hey everyone, this is going to be a quick video on using the Nodachi. Now this was a question that I had on a comment from one of my videos, and the question was, when you're using the Nodachi, do you use the same techniques as the katana? And the answer is yes, but there are definitely some things that make it easier to use. So we're going to get into that right now. One thing that definitely makes it easier is if you are taller. Like me, I'm 6'2" and I have long arms. But if you're short, obviously that's something you can't change. You can't change your height. But there are other things you can do that will make it easier. One thing that definitely makes it easier is, for one, not to have the display knot here. As you can see, I have the sagio untied the way that it needs to be for use. That is one thing that definitely makes it easier. So instead of having the display knots that the swords normally come with when you first get them. Now another thing is, as you can see, my kurigata is not all the way back here. It's right here. So when I'm holding it, it's still near my hand. Some people like it to where it's just below your palm. This one here for me is just under that part of my palm. And I did that because this is a Nodachi. Now all swords should have it to where it's at most only to where the kurigata is at the bottom of your palm. But it becomes even more crucial with the Nodachi because, for example, with this one. This came with the kurigata almost another 3 inches down, which made it more like drawing a 38-inch blade than a 35-inch blade. Another thing that makes it easier is do not have a blade that is too long. Now this here is 35 inches, which obviously it's not short, but it's on the shorter end of Nodachi. I don't recommend starting with something that is 4 feet long. It's going to be really just too difficult to use. Now another thing, the length of the ska. The length of the ska cannot be too short, because the problem is, if you have the ska too short, then it's not going to be balanced properly. And while we're on it, another thing that makes this easier is for the tang to be as long as possible. Longest for a katana that you can typically do is for the tang to be only about a ½ inch away from the end of the ska. What that does is it gives the most balance and strength to the ska that you can have. So that's definitely another thing that makes this a lot easier. Now with ska length, I definitely recommend, typical is 3 hands length, at least in my style. You want at least 4. Although 3½ hands can work as well. So as you can see, 1 hand, 2, 3, and 4. So this ska is 4 hands long, and you want that for the balance. Now just because it's 4 hands long doesn't mean you have to hold it with the hand at the bottom of the ska right here. Like me, I personally hold it like this. So there's a little bit of ska sticking past my hand instead of here. Okay, that deals with about between that and the way I hold my top hand, which is I basically hold it to where the index is just below the fuchi. So doing those two things in combination brings the ska length to feeling more like 3½ hands long rather than 4. And it still gives all the strength and balance that I need. Now when you're doing nuka-skate or noto, you're going to need more extension, basically as much extension as you can get, and you're going to need to use your hips. The hips become very important in this. Depending on your style, you can sometimes get away with a lot of hip movement, or depending on sometimes the certain kata. I noticed that certain kata are more difficult to use than Nodachi, but it's not impossible. Noto is the same thing. You're going to use more extension and more hip movement to get the sword put away. Now, when we are drawing, I'm going to show you a side view of the draw. Extending, extending, and as you can see, a lot of sayabiki is important here. Extending, extending, turn, and the sword came out. So as you can see, as I said, a lot of extension, a lot of hip motion. And I'll show you from the front. Now this close. Side view that close. Now, with no-toe, as you can see, extending, and I'm not just extending my arms, but I'm turning my hip. So as I turn my hips, it gives me that much more space to put it away. So if I didn't turn my hips, that's all I could get. So I still have that much more blade to go, about 6 inches. Now with the hip movement, as you can see, it helps me to get the rest of the blade put away. Now, when the sword is drawn, once again, really there's not much difference for most of the cuts. So if you're in Jodan doing Kiri-roshi is still Kiri-roshi. You're just going to cut slightly further down to cut towards their head. All the other cuts, Keisa, still, it's the same. The flat cut is still the same. Now the kiriage, once again, really it's the same for the most part. This is just where, when I was saying in the other video, hip to shoulder, this is why. Because with this sword, if I were to do a keisa angle, then for sure I would hit the floor. I hit the floor with a normal blade, let alone something this long. So now it becomes even more crucial to hip to shoulder. Hip to shoulder. It's all pretty much the same. As with all Japanese swords, I recommend that if you have a Nodachi that it have 2 mukugi. As you can see, there's one here and one right there. This top one may be a little bit harder to see, but it is right there. So I recommend 2 just because I like the idea of 2. There have been plenty of times where a single mukugi could slip out and disaster occurs. So that's always something that I like on a katana. Nodachi is 2 mukugi, not 1, but 2. Now, if you do not turn your hips, if you're tall, you'll probably be able to make the draw. Like here's me without turning my hips for the draw. But either way, still on the no-toe, it becomes very hard, and as you can see, I'm stretching really far. So again, the draw, not difficult, but no-toe, you do need to do the hip turn to be able to get it in all the way. Certain things may make using the Nodachi a bit easier or harder, such as this blade here is unokubi zukuri. So the blade is the same thickness from here to here, but at this point it narrows down and then goes right back to normal thickness. It also has a bohi running along the center and a bohi right here. Okay. All of these things make it easier to handle. Now, I'm not saying that you can't use one that is normal blade shape. You easily can, but these are just things that I find make it easier. Eventually, I would like to get a Nodachi with just a normal blade style with no bohi to compare it, but that's for another video. So, now, one thing that may also become more difficult is certain styles of shiburi. So, we're going to do oshiburi, and as you can see, this part isn't really difficult. It's this part because it's getting really close to the ground. Because it gets really close to the ground, we want to really be careful about that. All in all, you can use the Nodachi. It's not too difficult. Certain techniques will become more difficult, but all in all, it's not too bad. So, I hope this was helpful and informative. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya!